Berlin, November 9th, 1989. Thousands of people are standing at a concrete wall that has divided a city and a world for nearly 3 decades. Then, without a single shot fired, they begin to climb over it, chip away at it, and tear it down with their bare hands. This is the story of how one wall's fall ended a war that had lasted almost half a century. This is the fall of the Berlin Wall. To understand the wall, you have to go back to 1945. World War II had just ended, and Germany lay in ruins, defeated, divided, and occupied by the victorious Allied powers. The country was split into 4 zones: American, British, French, and Soviet. Berlin, the capital, sat deep within Soviet zone, but itself was divided into 4 sectors as well. As the wartime alliance between the Soviet Union and the Western powers collapsed into the Cold War, Germany became the front line of a new global conflict: capitalism versus communism. In 1949, the country formally split into 2 nations: West Germany, backed by the United States and its allies, and East Germany, controlled by the Soviet Union. Berlin itself, though located entirely within East German territory, remained divided too. West Berlin became a small island of democracy and capitalism, surrounded on all sides by communist East Germany. For over a decade, people crossed freely between East and West Berlin. But that freedom came at a cost the East German government could no longer ignore. Nearly 3 million people had fled from east to west by 1961, draining the East of doctors, engineers, and skilled workers.
On the night of August 13th, 1961, East German soldiers and workers began stringing barbed wire across the city, sealing the border overnight. Within days, the wire was replaced with concrete blocks. Families woke up to find they could no longer visit relatives living just streets away. Some Berliners were separated from loved ones mid-conversation, never expecting the divide to become permanent. The wall eventually stretched over 150 kilometers, encircling West Berlin entirely. It wasn't just one barrier, it was a deadly system of concrete walls, guard towers, floodlights, attack dogs, and a death strip of open ground where guards had orders to shoot anyone attempting to cross. Over the years, more than 100 people were killed trying to escape to the west. The Berlin Wall became the most powerful symbol of the Cold War, physical proof of what Winston Churchill had called the Iron Curtain dividing Europe. On one side stood freedom and prosperity, on the other, surveillance and scarcity. By the late 1980s, the Soviet Union itself was changing. A new leader, Mikhail Gorbachev, introduced policies of glasnost, openness, and perestroika, restructuring, loosening the iron grip Moscow had held over Eastern Europe for decades. Gorbachev made it clear the Soviet Union would no longer send tanks to crush uprisings in satellite states, as it had in Hungary in 1956 and Czechoslovakia in 1968. That signal changed everything. Across Eastern Europe, reform movements gained unstoppable momentum. In Poland, the Solidarity movement won historic elections. In Hungary, the government began dismantling its border fence with Austria, allowing East Germans on vacation there to escape westward. Suddenly, thousands of East Germans were fleeing through Hungary, Czechoslovakia, and Austria, creating a refugee crisis the East German government couldn't control. Inside East Germany, massive peaceful protests erupted. In Leipzig, tens of thousands marched through the streets chanting "Wir sind das Volk," "We are the people." The aging East German leadership, led by Erich Honecker, was forced to resign. His replacement scrambled to offer reforms, but the pressure from the streets was already unstoppable. On November 9, 1989, an East German official named Günther Schabowski held a press conference to announce new, loosened travel regulations. When a journalist asked when the new rules would take effect, Schabowski, poorly briefed and confused, said, "Immediately, without delay. It was a mistake that changed history." Within hours, East German television broadcast the news that the border was open. Thousands of Berliners rushed to the checkpoints, demanding to cross. Overwhelmed and without clear orders, the border guards eventually opened the gates. What followed was pure, unfiltered joy. East and West Berliners flooded through checkpoints, embracing strangers, weeping and celebrating atop the wall itself. People brought hammers and chisels, chipping away chunks of concrete as souvenirs of a divide that had defined their entire lives. Bulldozers soon arrived to tear down entire sections. The wall that had stood for 28 years fell in a single, chaotic and euphoric night. The fall of the wall triggered a chain reaction across the communist world. Within months, communist governments across Eastern Europe collapsed one after another: Czechoslovakia, Bulgaria, Romania. Less than a year later, on October 3, 1990, East and West Germany officially reunified into a single nation for the first time since the war. The reunification wasn't without hardship. Bridging decades of economic and social division between East and West took years, and echoes of that divide are still felt in Germany today. But politically and symbolically, the message was unmistakable. The Cold War, which had shaped global politics for 40 years, was ending. Just 2 years later, the Soviet Union itself dissolved entirely. Why does the fall of the Berlin Wall still matter? Because it proved that even the most fortified, heavily guarded barriers cannot permanently hold back people demanding freedom. It marked the end of a decades-long ideological struggle that had brought the world to the brink of nuclear war more than once. Today, a memorial trail and a few preserved wall sections stand where the barrier once stood, powerful reminders of division, but also of how quickly history can turn when people rise together. The Berlin Wall took less than a night to fall, but it took decades of courage, protest, and hope to bring it down. A reminder that no wall, however strong, can outlast the will of people determined to be free.